I'm Victor from Artineering, and I just finished my animation studies where I concocted a short film named B.R.I.A.N using 2D and 3D animation with Flair to be merged into a chaotic film where 4 characters are trying their best to survive on a strange ship. In this tutorial, I will show you the pipeline that I created to go from my selected 2D software into Maya and fine-tune all of the Flair settings to blend the 2D and 3D to create my final shot, all while seeing what the finished product will look like in real time, removing a lot of the guesswork during the rendering process and saving time. This will be separated into 3 parts. Part 1 is preparing and organizing to save time. Part 2 is setting up the scene in Maya, and Part 3 is rendering the final shot to do the final compositing. To begin with, I will go over some very simple things you need to know to use Flair to its full potential. Being organized is key, and knowing where all of your assets are is super important. And if you're not doing this systematically when starting a new project, I highly recommend you start now. You go to File, Project Window, New. This will create a new folder in the location that you've addressed it. So I have a specific folder for this tutorial, and I'm calling it 2D, 3D Pipeline. I accept, and then I go to File, Set Project, and here it is in the folder that I've asked it to, and I set. Once Maya is open, click on the Flair shelf and Style. This will open the style presets and will load Flair. Once you see that the background is loaded and that the pop-up appears, you can close it, and now you can select your style preset. I will select Lines. I will load World Scale and load. Once the pop-up appears, you can close the preset, and now you can go into poly modeling, create a cube. As you can see, the object has no attributes to it, so now you go back to the Flair shelf, press Preset. This will open the Material Preset tab. You always press Create New Material if it is for a separate object, and here I'm going to be using just the toon. Once you've loaded the toon, the attribute editor will change, and it will also create a new light for the toon shader itself. Now, using the exact same principle, I will now go to Poly Modeling, Create a New Plane, and then give it the Textured Material Preset, Load. This will create a new pop-up called the Create Render node. You will go to File and select it. This will be so that we can give it the actual 2D image sequence. And then from there, as you can see, the attribute editor has changed. And now in image name, you will select the little folder. And if you have correctly set your project in Maya, this will open to the source images folder inside of your set project. This is where we will be saving our 2D folders straight into here, as we can then directly export the sequences and they will all be contained in one single folder. When you're ready to start exporting your 2D animation, I grab both of my scenes, so I use Toon Boom Harmony, and I copy my scene folders into my set project source images. This basically means that when I start exporting all my frames, they will already be in my set project. Not only that, but if I incorrectly export an image, I can go into my Toon Boom Harmony and then change the frame, re-export, and then nothing will change in Maya. It will already be there with the change of the frames that have been done. This means now that I can go into my image plane, into preset, create new material, textured, load, file, and inside image name, when I go into the folder, both of my scenes will already be there. And once you have exported your frames, for example, I have my 3 characters, they are already here. I can open them and then use the image sequence. This will now turn it into the animation. Now to export all of our 2D image sequences. If you don't use Toon Boom Harmony, don't worry, the principle is the same. Here I have 3 different characters and the background. Now I'm going to hide the background, and now I'm going to separate each into 3 different exports. Let's say I want to render him. I go into the node view, and in node view go to right. From right, I'm going to name it Meet, as that is his name's character. I'm going to start it at 1, leading zeros to 3. This way, Maya correctly understands how many frames there actually are. The image format, PNG, and the colors with alpha. The alpha gives it its transparency, and the depth, 16 bits. And choose the folder. Now, I've already made these renders, but for example, I would do New, call it Meet 2, select the folder, and this folder itself is in my set project. So this means that when I have rendered it, I can instantly go into Maya and start connecting the textures with the plane. Close, File, Export, Render Right Nodes. Okay. Now do this for all characters. Now that I have exported all of my 2D animation, I have opened my Maya scene and I am ready to start importing the image sequences into my scene. To do this, I will go into poly modeling, create a plane, move it up, and make it bigger. Press F so that I can focus on it. And now I will go back into the Flair shelf, preset material, make sure that create new material is selected, textured, load. Press file. This will turn the plane black. Press the little folder inside image name. Now I find in 2D 3D pipeline, scene 20, frames, doc, first image, open. Here it is. I will press now use image sequence, as this will now turn it into the 2D animation. Now the aspect ratio of my animation is 16:9, so I'm going to make sure that these are the correct sizes. And once I have done this, I'm now going to rename it to the scene that it is, enter. And now I'm going to duplicate the image sequence, duplicate it again, and now I'm going to rename them scene 20 doc. I'm going to do the same, I'm going to repeat the same process for all 3 images. I now have all 3 planes with all 3 of my image sequences, but the rectangle is still black as I have not specified that it needs to be transparent. So now I will remove material presets, select all 3, go to the bulk attribute tool, and once it is loaded, give it the transparency. So straight away, you can see it gives it the transparency that it needs. And then I go down, and in transparency, the alpha mask cutoff is going to tell it that anything outside of the mask will be treated as if it is completely transparent. I've given the 2D image sequence to the transparency that they need, but as you can see over here, there are still some remnants of the lines that are being applied to the plane. I'm now going to select all 3 of my planes again, bulk attribute tool, go down to the transparency and make sure that the alpha mask cutoff is much higher. Now if I go too high, this will ruin the texture that I have done, so you've got to find that sweet spot. Now the colors that I've exported as my image sequence aren't exactly the colors that are being shown on my screen right now. I have opened bulk attribute tool with all 3 planes again, and now by just going to the diffuse factor, just going to lower it until the colors are exactly how I want them. So here we go. This seems about the right colors. Now I'm going to reposition my planes so that they are the correct size. So my scene is now complete. I've added my image sequences and I've added my camera, and I've changed all the coloring to the way that I want them to look like. The only issue now, as you can see, the sketch lines here and here are either encroaching into the 2D animation or are avoiding it too much. Now this creates inconsistencies. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to render multiple passes. The walls, the floor, the console, meet, prot, doc. And let's start with the walls. I'm going to go to the Flair shelf, into SEQ. This will open the Flair renderer. And then I'm going to select in the quality, TAA, in the alpha pre-mult. The format will be EXR, and I personally choose the camera folders. I'm using the toon lines and the sketch lines, so I'm going to click on toon lines, sketch lines, and line AOVs, and then I'm going to remove all the things that I don't use. For example, the ambient occlusion, normals depth, control light, shadows, specular, and lighting. Now before I do anything else, I'm going to go to Browse, and then go to the folder that I have chosen. So in this case, it will be 2D, 3D pipeline tutorial. As you can see, I've already done all these renders. I've organized and named them so that when I'm importing it into After Effects, it's easy for me to know which render is which. But for this case, let's say it's walls. So I'm going to name it 0.5 as I already have it, like I said, and then name it walls again. Press enter, open it, select it. All that's left now is the actual render itself. So I'm going to press render AOVs. And now repeat this for all the other passes you have to do. Now on to After Effects. Once all your passes are rendered, you're going to open your compositing app. Now I'm using After Effects in this case. The first thing you're going to do is go to Edit, Preferences, Import, and then you're going to change the sequence footage to however many frames per second your animation is. In my case, it's 24 images per second, just like the industry standard. You press OK. New composition, I'm going to name it S20_S21, as this is a continuous shot and it is technically 2 scenes. Press OK. And now you have to import all your render passes. Now the good thing about EXR files is that it is like exporting a Photoshop file with many layers. Let me explain. You go into the left part of your screen, inside of Project, and double click, and select inside of my set project file, images, go to walls, and then press the first image, select open EXR sequence, and create composition. Import. I'm going to press composition and then make sure pre-composed layers is unchecked and then check contact sheet. Now, the contact sheet will show you all of the layers that have been rendered. If I drag it into my composition, this will show all of the layers that have been rendered. As you can see, my sketch lines are in 2 different layers, as there are 2 of them. Here are the line AOVs, and then the rest of the layers. Now let's get rid of this, and then create a folder here. I'm going to call it 1 walls. Select the composition, select the contact sheet, and select the .exr, and put them into my folder. So now I've imported my walls into my composition, but it is its own composition. So I'm going to drag it in, and what I can now do is I can actually double click here. Now these are all the different layers that have been rendered for this .exr composition. And now you can play around with this with whichever lighting you want. I personally do not need to, as this is technically the final output that I was looking for. But there are many resources on YouTube for how to composite and then how to change the lighting if that is what you are looking for. Now let's go back to my original composition. I'm going to rename my layer by pressing enter, call it 1.walls. Now all that is left is to import the rest of the layers. Now that I've finished importing all of my renders, all that is left is to put them inside of my composition. Always making sure I'm selecting the composition and not the open EXR, as that just gives me the output and not the layers with the transparency. So I drag it, drop it, press enter, call it floor. Again, composition, drag, drop, enter, console. The console is actually behind meat, which it shouldn't be. So I'm just going to drag and drop it and make sure that meat is correctly behind the console. The scene is now complete. My issue now is that it is difficult to differentiate between the characters and the background because the contrast and brightness are basically the same. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to go to effects and presets here and put brightness and then add brightness and contrast to each of the characters. I'm going to drag it, drop it, and I'm just going to play with it, do a -5, and then up the contrast just a tiny bit. This will give it that slight difference of color that each character needs. I've already done it for the other characters. Just going to turn it on. As you can see, it gives it just that slight pop that you need just to really differentiate all the characters from the scene. Much more saturated, which is how I like it. And so the final result is this.
Shush me, this is important. Where are we? Well, that's relative, isn't it? There seems to be an issue with the temporal matrix, a negative feedback loop that's destabilizing B.R.I.A.N.
And that's all I have time for today. I've showed you my entire pipeline of how I made my short film. If you like what you saw, here is a quick teaser.
You've killed us now.
Guys, I've got a great idea. Who is Brian?
Hey, what about this and
Me, what about over there?
Oh, that's a chair.
Yes, just a normal Monday morning.
I hope you enjoyed watching this as much as I enjoyed making it. I've been working on this project for a long time and I cannot wait to show it to more people once it's perfect. I would like to take this time to thank the team at Artineering and especially thank Santiago for his help. Though this was a solo project, I couldn't have done it without these people. And you are only one step away from creating this 2D, 3D blend. So why don't you become a Patreon and join this list of people creating cool art. Once again, I'm Victor from Artineering. Thank you, goodbye. J'en ai rien à foutre, j'ai la tête dans les nuages.